Hello, and welcome to our social media channel for Advocates for Medically Fragile Kids NC. I'm Jenny Hobbs, and I'm here today with Alessandra Fabreo, and then also our invited guest, Corey Dunn with Disability Rights. Corey's an attorney. She's been with Disability Rights for a number of years doing public policy. And so welcome, Corey. Thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here, Jenny. Thanks.
So if we could start, could you just tell us a little bit about what a day-to-day kind of looks like for you at Disability Rights, what your role is there?
Oh gosh, one of the best things about my job is that there is no day to day. Everything is everything is different every day. I say that, I've been with the organization for 14 years, and I often say that I am frequently tired but never bored. And that's because the portfolio of issues that we work on is so very broad. And so one day might include talking with legislators, another might be focused on uh, policymakers and civil servants who run the Medicaid program, and another day might be, as yesterday, going to a Board of Elections meeting to make sure that voters with disabilities absentee ballots are counted. Um, we have a really broad range of responsibilities as an organization, and my role means that I get to really have a little bit of a hand in all of that, which is great fun.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the obligations as our state's P&A, like what that means?
I'd love to. So, Disability Rights North Carolina is our state's protection and advocacy agency. Every state and territory in the US has one by federal law, and we've been the P&A since 2007. We are we are a private, independent, nonprofit law firm, and we work to advance and defend the legal rights of people with disabilities in North Carolina. That responsibility crosses settings. So, whether we're talking about schools or hospitals or employment or housing discrimination, those are all in our wheelhouse. Uh, but it's also cross disability. And that is one thing that is really unique about our organization. We don't serve just people with developmental disabilities or just people with complex medical conditions or just people with mental health disabilities or mobility impairments or sensory impairments or you name it. Um, we are not specific to one kind of disability. Whether you have had your disability since birth or you acquired it yesterday, you are our people.
That's really amazing that you guys have the time and energy to cover so many different areas. And I know that, funding cuts have hurt you guys significantly, and I really hate that that's happened. And
Thanks.
that makes it hard to figure out how you do cover all of those bases.
It is harder, and it means that we have to make really tough choices about how to use our resources, our very limited resources, as effectively as possible. And I often tell folks that we are different from other civil legal services organizations in that we focus on using our resources and skills for maximum impact. Some folks may be familiar with a legal aid model, which is incredibly important. Legal aid is a national model that really focuses on serving as many people as possible, because there is such a lack of access to legal services in this country and in our state. And that work is incredibly important. And they work very hard to have people to give legal representation and counsel to as many people as they can. That is not our model. Our model is to choose litigation, individual representation, and policy advocacy that will make the biggest impact in the most lives of people with disabilities.
So what drew you to this kind of work? I know it can't be easy, but I'm sure rewarding.
Absolutely rewarding, and absolutely not easy, but it's always um, it's always really been part of my life. So I grew up in a family of people who worked in human services, including my mother and my grandfather. I actually spent a lot of my childhood um, in community group homes for adults, particularly women with developmental disabilities. And so I I had, you know, many a meal that was on a schedule that was provided by a nutritionist who had maybe never been in that home.
Mm.
Um, I've spent time in sheltered workshops. I have spent time in more congregate residential settings, but I also have personal connections to disability. I have a family of folks with significant medical disabilities, conditions that um, have advanced to the point of being a source of significant functional limitations in their lives. I have my own mental health disabilities, and just, to keep it interesting, like decided to pile on a nice chronic pain condition, just because why be limited? So, all of that is deeply personal. And I particularly come to the work with the experience of having been uninsured, having had family members with significant disabilities who were uninsured. And so that certainly informs my work. And I spent years as a direct support professional. And so when this opportunity arose, I jumped at it.
Corey, I had a question that I was interested in asking is, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your personal connection with our organization with medically fragile kids and how your collaboration started with our organization?
I might actually need Jenny's help here because I was trying to remember the date of all of Advocates for Medically Fragile Kids and C's early
It was
early
spring,
work,
the
2015,
spring of 2016.
16. Okay. So I was a little blurry on the timeline. Um, so in 2016, there was a waiver renewal happening in the CAPC program. And the CAPC program, as your folks know, is really a critical tool for helping families live together, which seems like such an obvious thing to want, but much harder um, than it should be a lot of days. So parents want their children to live with them. And um, CAPC is part of how we do that in this state. And we started getting phone calls. Actually, this was not really on my radar. Um, I do a lot of work in Medicaid, but Medicaid is big. It's got a lot going on. So we started getting phone calls from folks who said, "We need your help with CAPC, and we're going to keep calling until you give it to us," basically. It was very
I'm
effective.
nothing but persistent, right?
I mean, we have a former board member, beloved board member, who used to say, gentle pressure, relentlessly applied, is very effective. And I think you all demonstrated that. Um, so as a result of the phone calls, I dug a little more and started learning about what families were experiencing and what they were afraid of. And lo and behold, they were right. Shocking. I know, right? Parents knew what their kids needed and knew that the policies that were being proposed were not it. And so we started working together on a variety. I mean, there was a lot of little stuff, but the first big thing was really that they were trying to smush together CAPC and CAPDA in a way that on paper, when it was first proposed, looked good because it could have brought the CAPDA services up to the kind of toward the robustness of CAPC. But instead, the actual proposal that was put out there was to drop CAPC services to look more like CAPDA, which of course defeated the whole purpose in our eyes of merging the programs. And so that was the first big um, policy decision that we worked together on. And we communicated very clearly what that would look like for the families in your organization and for a broader range of families that we work with, and um, a whole crew of incredibly passionate, earnest, thoughtful moms. Not that this work is limited to moms, but in that case, it was moms very ably and visibly stood up for the services that their families need. And pretty quickly on the heels of that, we were facing some threats at the federal level about what the Medicaid program structure might be. And in cooperation with national groups like Little Lobbyists and others, Advocates for Medically Fragile Kids in C and Disability Rights North Carolina all worked to inform policymakers about what this meant for our communities. And it really was just this sort of mutually reinforcing relationship of, I think, respect and um, shared values. We are committed to the notion that people with disabilities shouldn't have to enter a facility to get care and should have access to the care they need. And that was what the leaders of your organization were focused on, and it was really fantastic. We affectionately referred to the callers in aggregate as the CAPC mamas. And I would not bet against a CAPC mama ever, and certainly not a whole group of y'all. So um, I learned a lot. I think the folks in your organization learned a lot by working together. And I was really personally committed to making sure that these incredibly passionate advocates had the information and skill that I could share to help you be even more effective. Because I was really happy to have more people to link arms with.
Yeah. Yeah, I know I personally learned so much from you about policy and language and why things say the way that, why things are written the way that they are, and what can and cannot be changed. So, yeah,
And who has the
that was a
power
good,
to change what?
yeah.
That's one of the things that I think is hardest to sort out. Like, whose decision is this? Does this decision live at an MCO or at an insurance company or at the Medicaid state agency or at CMS or at the North Carolina General Assembly, or who can
Mhm.
fix this? And that is often like we identify the problem, and then one of the very first things we have to figure out is who can change it.
Mhm.
And so we did a lot of that together, including sitting in a lot of meetings.
With my binder.
Jenny's binders are legendary, man. Don't sleep on the binders.
So we've heard. I've yet to see it. I've seen it virtually, but I've yet to see this beautiful binder in person live.
It's
It's
really
not one,
impressive.
it's a bunch of them. So it's a bunch of little ones.
There is I think you have shrunk them, but you used to have a lot,
Yeah,
most of your Medicaid stuff, your Medicaid policy stuff in one big binder, which I believe is a practice you developed as a parent advocate to, besides as a case manager, but because you always need 1,000 things and you don't know which one you need on any given day. So
right.
you just have them all with you all the time. And anyone who has coordinated care across multiple physicians and different geography and different payors knows that dance.
For sure, for sure. So Corey, how do you see us like moving into the future, like future needs and partnerships with us? Where do you see the biggest need on the horizon?
On the horizon, I mean, I think we're in the middle of it, right? I feel like we are constantly having to re-educate policymakers about the importance and the purpose and the effect of Medicaid. There's a lot of talk about how much money Medicaid costs, in mainstream media, but there's not a ton of discussion of why we have it and how we got here and why it is worth it to invest in healthcare for people who need it. And from where we sit, that might seem kind of obvious because, we're talking about the people we love and know and want to be well, um, or want to be as well as they can be. And if that's not your perspective, it might require a little more discussion to understand why it's valuable that parents can provide good quality care for their children at home, that they can be included in school as much as possible, that they can be um, have social relationships with their peers, including their non-disabled peers.
Yeah.
And all of that seems really clear when you have a particular child in mind. But um, I think that we I think that the base of our work together is always going to be helping decision makers understand why we want what we want. We can, I could just walk around and talk to people about what we want all day, but it doesn't really mean much unless
Mhm.
you have a very human framework to attach that to. Why does it matter that Jenny or Elaine or Natalie or anyone else's child is receiving high quality healthcare without having to choose an institution, a hospital, an ICF, a, a nursing home? I mean, in other states, kids are in large numbers languishing in nursing homes. And you shouldn't have to drive over to a nursing home to hug your kid. I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the principles that we hold so dear are easier for a lot of people to understand when we apply them to children than when we try to apply them to adults. Like I shouldn't have to drive to a nursing home to hug my kid. That feels clear. It feels less clear to folks, I think, when you apply it to adults. So I think that for us organizationally, it's incredibly helpful to have these very personal stories that are compelling and illustrate the complexity of the policies that are implicated here. But I think for you all, we continue to offer as much as we can support for the understanding of the processes and the legal issues and the politics of state versus federal and within the state government, all the different stakeholders and all the different roles. That is, I think, what we bring to the table in this partnership. And a whole bunch of y'all have been our individual clients as well.
Yeah, I sort of
Corey,
feel like our role is the eyes and ears of what's happening on the ground. And when I see a pattern, quick to reach out to y'all because that is having a bigger collective impact that you sort of have that
Exactly.
mindset
We
towards.
won't be able to fix every error or failure in the system as an organization. We will never. We are 40 some staff now, and some of us, myself included, are working on a reduced schedule in order to make our limited funds stretch a little further.
Mhm.
And um, so we have no illusions that we'll be able to represent everyone who needs and deserves representation. We hate that. We hate saying no. But also, we are determined that where it's not just one person's error or a misreading of a rule, where it is a systemic failure, say Medicaid issues guidance that we believe is incorrect, or there's a decision there's a major player who is making consistently the same pattern of incorrect decisions. Those are the kinds of things that we're able to engage on and hopefully really move the needle so that more families don't have to go through it.
Mhm.
Corey, I know that your time is limited. I did have one more question very quickly that just intrigues me. You mentioned how difficult it is to convey why Medicaid matters. Unless you've walked this life and lived in these shoes, what would you say is one thing that you have found over your years of experience when you are advocating for medically fragile children, for example, anyone with a disability? What is that one thing that seems to turn a light on, flip that switch where someone will go, ah, that moves them to actually be able to see in the eyes of someone who's lived this life?
It's it's stories. I mean, no question. It is, I can think of specific stories from 2016 through 2018 that moved the needle so much because they helped policymakers, whether they're in the executive branch or the legislature, helped policymakers understand that we were not talking about how much it makes sense to spend on a particular service. We were talking about how is Jenny keeping her family together at home and how is this parent able to live a life, in many cases work a job, right? Because people need to earn a living and that shouldn't be impossible because you love someone with a disability. That just doesn't make sense. So, you know, real stories about sometimes really mundane stuff. Like, how hard is it to get home when the direct support professional who is serving your loved one, when there's a shift change and the replacement doesn't show up and the first one has to leave because they have their own childcare issues and or more likely they have to go to their other job or whatever the juggling act is. What does that really look like in real life for a parent who is trying to provide high quality care and support and to raise their children? It's not like the job of a parent is not just to provide care. You're raising humans, and raising good humans is hard without medical complexity. And layering on medical complexity, it's hard for most people who haven't lived it to imagine the mental load of scheduling staff and interviewing replacements because there's always a replacement needed, and navigating the new rules and uh, going to the occasional appeals process, and you shouldn't have to know all of that, but you do to be successful at it. I mean, it's tough, and so I think that's it. I think that's what moves the needle every single time. It's when a legislator or a Medicaid official or an insurance company employee can see what it is that a parent is fighting for, and that it is really about their relationship with their kid and that kid's ability to live in the world and grow and thrive. And that's what everyone wants for their loved ones. So that is easier to translate for most people, I think. They don't know why it costs money to have tubing for the oxygen concentrator and the durable medical equipment uh, suppliers, and they don't want to know all that. Explaining all of that is exhausting. But what they do understand is that you have someone you love who is vulnerable, and you are fighting like hell to keep them in your life, one way or another. And I will never be able to do that without people with lived experience with me.
So, right. So the success is really humanizing processes that are just by virtue of how they're orchestrated based on dehumanization of the process. So bringing that
Right, because
humanization back into it.
simplification, which is often one of the goals of public policy, doesn't really work that well in this space.
Right.
Yeah, you just
People would
laugh about
like tidy rules that give you clear answers every time. But you know what? These are people, and it sometimes takes more complexity than that. And so we're going to have to fight for that ability to be flexible um, and to really meet the needs of individuals and not just give everyone the same thing and call it fair.
Right. As a mother of a medically complex and fragile child that requires 24/7, it's always interesting how you have to convey there's a reason why your child is considered complex because there is extreme complexity. So it's lovely to hear you use that word. It's complex. We're dealing with humans, and when you're dealing with a medically fragile child on top of it with severe complexities, it just magnifies the web of intricacies in being able to understand what they need and why, the why behind it.
And
But
then, God forbid, we layer on medical trauma and the financial needs of the family and, rurality and its impact on provider availability. And, it's a big, messy world. And um, we don't get to pretend it's not just because that's inconvenient.
Yeah, it is a big, messy world, and that's why we're thankful that we have people like you in places like disability rights there that are frontline battle warriors. So appreciate you so.
Well, come link arms with us. It's fun over here.
I am. I'm ready.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
thank you
Thank
so much. Thank you, Corey, for carving out time in your overloaded day. And we appreciate that. It's lovely that everyone gets to know a little bit about you. And I think that's important. And that's what we were hoping to do. And even I've got to know a little bit more about you as well. And to everyone listening, please subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care.